Harlock, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm all up for this. Like, I love it. Talking about game dev stuff with people.
Awesome. Well, here we go.
Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, episode 40, Harlock. And as I know, I'm Captain Harlock, but I'm just going to go with Harlock today, okay? If that's okay with you.
That's fine. We don't have to be formal. That's fine.
We're keeping it screen name appropriate for today. We'll do this thing on Twitch, whatever. Anyway, so this is going to be probably a first, maybe. So Harlock is an independent game developer, has quite a bit of experience at this point in game development, and we're going to chat about that. We're going to talk about game development stuff. He has recently launched a video essay series on video games, and it's really cool stuff, really cool content. I'm excited to talk about it all. Thank you so much for being here, Harlock. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like, it was a lot of fun getting invited.
Well, I
was excited like all week. So,
well, I also got to say that spoilers here. Harlock and I are friends outside of this. Like, I've met him through streaming and all this and speed running and all that kind of stuff, and I got to spend some time with him at AGDQ this year, live and in person. And even at GDQX, I saw you for like 30 seconds at GDQX at TwitchCon. So,
yeah, I'm sorry about that stuff, man. It's just staff was like, nobody's in here. Go back home. It's like, people are in there.
So as many of you know, I play games that aren't the most popular. So if I do a GDQ, a lot of times I'm in the morning or after hours, and TwitchCon was no different. So trying to get in there during off hours is a bit of a challenge, to say the least. Yes, we've got the game dev crew here in the chat. Emily, Dog Developer, Josh. This is going to be exciting. We got some people who do dev. Like, this is going to be fun and geeky, and I can't wait. But let's first.
That's going to be great.
I totally agree. Let's take it back. Tell us a little bit about your history with games. When did you get started? What were some of your favorite games growing up and things like that?
Oh, man. I started very early, but it was kind of like physical therapy reasons. I had a physical therapist, because I didn't have hand-eye coordination growing up. So one of them was just like, you know what? I'm just going to put him in front of like a game console. So they were like to my dad, just get him a game console and he'll be fine. So my first console was actually a Famicom, and my first game was Popeye and Super Mario Bros. So that was fun.
Popeye, I always forget about Popeye. That must have been a popular game because everyone I knew had that game as well. Like, that was one of the popular ones growing up.
Oh, and Mappy, I forgot that one. Yeah, that one was a fun one. I still have that jingle stuck in my head.
What's the name of the game?
Mappy, forget the entire name, but it's a mouse. He's a little cop, and it's like you're avoiding getting captured by house cats.
That's awesome. I've never played that one. That sounds great.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's okay. Dog just confirmed. Mappy in the chat. There you go. It's interesting that you got like you hand-eye coordination. That's the thing we heard so often is like one of the benefits of gaming is hand-eye coordination. Did it help at all? Was it something that seemed to actually help?
Yeah. Like I've been able to overcome a lot of things growing up because of video games. So, So I've just been involved with video games since I was little. But yeah, it was a lot of fun growing up, getting the Famicom, and then coming back to the States. We upgraded to Super Nintendo because I was born here in the States, then we went to Mexico. I lived in Mexico City for a bit, expanded like the Famicom library to like Final Fantasy and stuff, and then came here. And then, Mario and stuff. I skipped out on like the Sega generation, so I feel bad about it because there's a lot of good games that I missed out on.
A lot of great games in that library. If you don't mind me asking, so in Mexico, was like the Famicom the system that you were able, or did you have to import that? And like, how do you get? Was it not Nintendo in Mexico?
No, we didn't have the Nintendo in Mexico. It was strictly like the Famicom, and then I believe the Super Famicom. They didn't really get the U.S. editions of the consoles till much later on.
Wow!
Because throughout the years, I periodically went back to Mexico to go visit family, but also to buy games because games are very cheap over there.
Right.
So I didn't see anything U.S. standard until like maybe the PlayStation came out, and
Wow.
that's when they got the PS1 and the like Super Nintendo and stuff. It was so strange
It is.
because they skipped out on so much. So
No, that's super interesting. Dog developers in the chat, and he talks about what the systems are that they get in Brazil, and they're still apparently selling the Sega Genesis in Brazil. Like it's interesting the way different countries around the world have access to. There's different versions of the systems and everything like that. So kind of cool that you grew up on the Famicom, because there's a great library of games that didn't come out in the States, that are on the Famicom.
It was actually also a modded Famicom, believe it or not. It had its own storage system, so I never figured it out when I was little. But later on, I figured out that it could save games, like entire cartridges. It had like a button on it.
No way.
Never knew it until like years later.
That's so wild. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, do you still have your childhood Famicom?
Somewhere in storage. Yeah,
That's
I
cool.
have like all my older consoles like in storage somewhere, except for the consoles at my side right now. These are my like speedrunning or like casual consoles, if it were.
Well, and if you don't want, I do have to comment, because your room just looks like a total gamer room right now with the with the gaming stuff all over the place. I love it, man. That's that's the dream right there. It's
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about Undertale earlier, but
Yeah.
like it's hard to see behind me. But
you can see it. Yeah,
I'm just gonna lift it up.
do it.
I have the my turntable with the vinyl collection, and then the poster up there is the most recent poster for the 5th anniversary. So, I guess I'll show you my consoles.
Yeah, if you don't mind, that'd be awesome.
They're the terrible stat. So
As they should
I have my Super Nintendo, if you can see.
be. Yeah.
And then a whole bunch of stacked of like DVDs and stuff. I have the Xbox somewhere under there, the PS2, the Wii U is over there. I have a bunch of stuff at the ready.
And I think that's one of those things. I mean, especially for us who are, in our 30s, we're a little bit older, like the variety of gaming. And I don't know if you had this experience, but when I was growing up, typically you had one console at a time, if you were lucky. I was fortunate. We had Nintendo, and then we had a TurboGrafx 16. But so, we were limited in the access we had to our library. So my best friend had a Genesis. I would play his Genesis. I had another friend of the Super Nintendo. So like getting a chance to go back and playing a lot of these games as an adult has been really like a great joy, because it makes me feel like a kid again. I don't know if you had that similar experience.
Yeah, especially with certain games, like one of my treasured games I actually just got a hold of. Actually, I think I have it. Yeah, this one, Kirby's Dream Land 3.
Oh yes, a Super Famicom, awesome.
Yeah, so I recently got that one just because I felt like playing it again. So
absolutely. So if you don't mind me asking, then what led you in? At what point do you get game development bug, or what do you start? Is there a point where you're like, man, what's it like how would I create a game? Do you ever have? When does that happen?
That happened to me late middle school. Yeah, because I was taking, believe it or not, I was taking an animation class.
Awesome.
And then somebody showed me the Games Factory, which is Click Team's earlier, like the earliest iteration of their game engine. The engine that nowadays you see like Five Nights created on.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh man, that's pretty cool. Can I get a piece of that? And then my parents, super supportive of the time, they were just like, yeah, sure, we'll get it. You played around with. I think it was like $100 or like $90 at the time. They got it for me, and like I made some really terrible like Mario fan games back then.
Awesome.
They may or may not be still on Newgrounds. I don't know. I have to check. I really don't want to check, but yeah, that's how it started. But it didn't really hit me until the end of high school. I took another course. It was using Dark Basic. I don't know if any of the game devs in chat know what I'm talking about when I say Dark Basic. It was a really, really terrible 3D basic engine. But it was me and a friend of mine in this one class. We made a small game. for the National Urban League because they were like, "Hey, can you make us a game to show that this class is actually working for people?" And they're like, "Sure, why not?" And what was really great about it was when we showed it off at this convention of theirs, seeing other people play it and like having fun and like going like, "Oh man, this is amazing." Like I want to do like stuff like this when I grow up, and hearing that, and like I'm still in high school, I'm like, oh man, this is where I need to be. So that's where the hunger kind of started for me, and then through that convention actually is where I got the scholarship to both to Japan and Full Sail.
So if you don't mind me just touching on that just for another moment, like, is it something where you obviously got the bug? This is the thing that gave you the itch when you did this. At that moment, are you learning how to do some of these things through class, or is it something where you're breaking it on your own? You're trying like your own experience. How are you going about developing some of these skills before you even go more, into more formal training, after high school?
At first, this was just like, I'll try the class out. I liked it before middle school, and like I have a few games I've done, but nothing like through actual code. So I was like, okay, sure, why not? And I didn't think it would hit me as hard as it did. So I wasn't serious about it at first. And then when I caught the bug, I was like, man, I got to know everything there is now.
See, that's one of the things that struck me right away. Like after just spending a few minutes with you, it's obvious that you have a great passion for gaming and games. And I'm curious, at that time period, middle school, high school, when you're starting to get this bug, are there some games that may have inspired you to kind of pursue this as well?
One of my biggest influences is the Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy series.
Nice.
It's super nerdy here, but I don't care.
Yeah, go for it.
Growing up with the Super Nintendo and Final Fantasy IV, my mom actually helped me learn to read with Final Fantasy IV.
No way.
Yeah, so it was so that's a game that has super sentimental value to me, even though it's a terrible RPG. But hey, it happens.
I don't know. I would say, okay, terrible is a little rough, but okay, I enjoyed it. But
I guess comparative to today's standards,
right,
I
that's
guess.
right.
But
That's right.
it's nothing. I still enjoy it.
Yeah.
So I still love it for its quirks.
Man, I'm so glad to hear that you say that it helped you. Like that's how your mom taught you to read as well, because that's something that struck me right away that I didn't put together until I got older. But when I was playing through RPGs on Nintendo, Super Nintendo early on, it's like reading a fantasy novel, and I didn't really connect those dots that there was so much text because we didn't have voice acting or anything like that at this point. What a great, that's a really good point about learning words that you may not have known and things like that. The way that the text is displayed on screen, scrolling and all that kind of stuff. That's a really interesting observation.
I think it all just started because there was a lot of like words in it that I didn't understand. So at some point, I guess she just kind of like was like, you know what, screw it. We'll go through the game together.
So that's pretty cool. So you earned some scholarships to go to Full Sail, and I can't remember the other university. I'm sorry, what was the other?
Or Digipen.
Digipen, okay.
Yeah.
And is this something that did you have any idea of the kind of games you wanted to create, or is this something you just wanted to kind of absorb everything? What was kind of your plan moving forward, going to school for game development?
My first initial plan was like, I want to make like an RPG. I want to make my initial like super like out there goal, like shooting for the stars goal, was I want to make an RPG that can hit close to what like the acknowledgement that Chrono Trigger did for the Super Nintendo. That's how big I wanted to make a game.
I love that. You gotta be.
I'm like,
no, go.
I'm like, I knew it wasn't over like a super big goal, but I was like, I don't care. I'm gonna aim for it. If I don't hit that, I'm gonna hit something like just equally as good or as amazing. So. Right. I always tried to keep myself hyped and motivated. So,
no, I totally dig it. So as you take, as you formalize some of your training, you're going to school for this and things like that. Are you given the option when you go? Can you take us a little bit through the school scenarios? Like, are you given the options of what kind of games to develop or what kind of jobs you may pursue? Like, what is training like after high school when you go to different schools and things like that?
After I went to high school, I shadowed a student at DigiPen, just to see what the curriculum was like, and it was standard school stuff. But when it came to game development, they handle things in an interesting way that was kind of similar at Full Sail, where you go through some game design courses, and usually it's like, hey, if it's a programming course and like the teacher has you making a mechanic, it's like, hey, make a game with this mechanic within the school, like semester or such, or this is after the basic programming classes. This is like actual game design courses. One of the most fun I had with the game design course was at Full Sail. Every week we had to create a design document, and the teacher would have us reach into a bag filled with like mysterious items, pull out 3 of those, and make a game design document based on the 3 items.
That is such a cool idea.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Sometimes it was like, okay, create a video game design document or create a board game. Oh, excuse me. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot of my courses were from point A to Z.
Right.
A lot of stuff.
And get you working in that environment. I'm chuckling a little bit because with my students, we literally just a couple weeks ago, we went through a game design document, and we did. There's a fair amount of disagreement on how valuable and what to include in a game design document and everything like that. So it was kind of fun exploring some of those things. But I'm glad to hear that that's. I mean, I'm curious. Is that something? Do you continue to use some of those things as you've worked in indie development and your own development of games? I mean, is there stuff that you've taken from school?
Pre-production stuff I always use, and then during production I always use what's called Agile or Scrum, and that's just to keep everything in order as far as like tasks or delegations go. But pre-production, you always, especially if you're working in a group, I always kind of just like jot down the basics of what we need, or somebody else would, whoever I'm working with. Talk with, if it's a game that's being paid for by a customer, then we go through it with them. Sometimes it's a nightmare, sometimes it's smooth.
Do you approach pre-production the same way when you're working on a personal, like a solo project or something like that, as opposed to a team? Is it a similar thing, or did that change at all?
When it comes to personal, I don't go like as in depth. But I do make a structured outline of, okay, I want to hit this goal first, like with my current project. I'm breaking it down to, okay, what's the minimum viable product for this thing? For like the turn-based strategy game that I'm doing for this game jam, I was like, okay, first I need to actually make it like a grid system that players can walk on. Then I make the player. And now I'm currently making the battle system for it. So I kind of do stuff like that, but not to the full extent.
No, it's cool.
The way I see it is, you want to make it, you want to go that extensive route if you have other people looking over your stuff, or you want to catch someone up really quickly. So.
No, absolutely.
Otherwise, I do whatever, as long as I have an idea of what I'm trying to accomplish.
So when's the moment where maybe this might have even happened before you even had your first job or anything? When do you feel like you've completed like your first game? What game was it? What was some of the early projects that you worked on that actually felt like you had achieved or completed something?
The first ones are usually, I mean, aside from game jam games, because those are a lot of fun. The first real one was probably my final project game. It was a 2.5D platformer. I wish it was still up, but they just took the production website down.
No!
I'm so sad. I know one of my old teammates still has it, so I'm gonna have to grab it from him. But that was a fun game. We wanted to publish it, but because of the school, we couldn't, because they technically owned it. So if we sold it, they would get like everything. But it was a lot of fun. That was and it was only a team of 5, so that really helped me figure out like, hey, this feels good to actually finish and complete a game that a lot of people played and had fun with.
What was your job on the game?
I did AI. I did a lot of stuff. The majority of my work was the AI for it. We had a time trial system. I implemented that. What else did I implement? Like I just remember my days focusing on the AI for like the standard enemies and the final boss. It was a lot of fun.
As you're going through this process, is there a point where there is a job that you? There are many different job titles within the games industry, and I'm wondering if one of them appealed to you more than the other. Was level design more appealing than, I don't know, whatever those jobs may be? Is there something that you wanted to pursue after school?
Believe it or not, the first job that I wanted to go for was actually tools creator, because during school I made a whole bunch of tools. I was known as the tools guy in school, so when it came to fund a project, they were like, "This guy, we need this guy on our team." I didn't create our level editor, but somebody else did. But I did have a hand in helping them at least. But yeah, during school, it was like my biggest, like I guess my magnum opus during school was making a video, like a video player that you could just insert into any project and load up any like MP4 or whatever. It was a lot of fun. They actually used it during the class at some point after I made it to teach video rendering.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun.
Oh, it's so cool. If you don't mind me asking, when was like your first paying gig? Was it a contract job? Was it with a company? And what's that process like of getting your first gig as a game dev?
I had an internship with EA Tiburon. That was a nightmare in itself.
That's so living up to the EA hype. Okay.
Like people talk about Valve's like Source engine being made out of duct tape, but this is like made out of bubblegum and chicken wire. My job there was just bug fixing, minor bug fixing. They didn't let any of us touch the big bugs. It's like, hey, there's a typo here. Can you fix that? It's like, okay. But my first gig was with Continuum, and that was a couple years after I graduated. Like maybe like an actual couple, like 2, like a 1.5, 2. I ran into them at Otronicon, which is an Orlando like video game indie convention. They were working on this game called Produce Panic at the time, which is a 3D beat 'em up shooter kind of game. You play as Sergeant Spud, like an anthropomorphic potato. You could collect like gun gun parts and put them together and create your own like weapon to take out like zombie fruits and vegetables. It was a lot of fun. Worked on that for a couple of years. That was my first paying gig. And then with them, I eventually did a whole bunch of freelancing. We worked with companies like Carnival Cruise Line. We made a few games for their ships. I believe 3 in total. This one lotto game, a poker game, and some other like slots game. It was a lot of fun. Then there was IBM. We made a space shooter for them. That was fun.
How cool.
Yeah, it was using their cloud software. I don't know why they wanted a space shooter, but hey, it's whatever. It was a lot of fun though. It was also my first game that was made in 4K. It was so wild.
Okay, so if I'm wrong here, let me know. But Continuum looks like a little bit smaller team. And so what were were you doing multiple jobs? Did you have one steady, like, especially that when you first started there, or you're working through some of these projects? What are you doing for Continuum and for the projects that you're working on?
At the time, it wasn't glamorous pay. I'll tell you that. but it was enough to get by. I stayed with my dad at the time because he was trying to help me out. Get a foot in the door somewhere
Yeah.
to like stabilize myself. So I'm grateful to him for letting me do that. But yeah, no. With Continuum, it was just small contracts here and there, or the big ones like the IBM one, the Carnival Cruise one. We had this one for a hospital. We did a racing game for them, using their own proprietary steering wheel. It was later on we found out that they're using it to help like stroke victims regain like maneuverability from like the wrist down.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was a lot of fun doing that, and knowing that it helped people. Yeah, it was a lot. It made me feel good. It made me feel like I was going in the right direction. So.
Absolutely. And I mean, are you, if you don't mind, are you doing like level to like, does everyone do, when you're working in a small team, I'm trying to, what's that? I assume like, I've worked on very small projects in my own personal work. And, a lot of times you're working 3 different jobs. I'm not just editing a video. I'm the cinema, I'm doing every different thing that possibly done. Is it like that in game design as well?
When you have a small team like the one we did, yeah, I was wearing a lot of hats. I did mainly all the programming. Then I had to put on an artist hat to do some UI.
Oh, wow.
I did some 3D modeling for that game. Another person was strictly all business or like PR for it. It was great. But yeah, no, you wear a lot of hats when you're a small team.
When I was browsing Continuum's website, it appears that a lot of their work, maybe all of their work, is done in Unity. And I'm curious if that's the game engine of choice for you, or the projects you've worked on, or have you experimented with some of the other engines out there? Talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Okay, no problem. With Continuum, I learned the ins and outs of Unity, so I am very comfortable with it. But in my downtime, I try to also keep like grasp of like Unreal. There's Game Maker 2 that's really up and coming right now. Then there's a few of the like backdoor ones that nobody likes to talk about, like Pixel Game Maker that just came out. It's actually pretty decent. I wouldn't use it professionally, but like for a game jam or prototyping, I would definitely use it. But I try to keep my hands on like all the current tools available, just to keep myself, I guess, current in the industry. Like I don't want to stick with just one engine.
I kind of agree with Emily on this one. Game Maker is impressive, especially for how easy it is to use. It's a shame it's so expensive. And that was kind of my, especially for, I'm teaching young people who have no experience with this at all. So you really want to be able to get your foot in the door pretty easily. And so having a barrier to entry like being so expensive is a real thing. Like that's a real thing for a student or somebody who's just getting started. And that's the one I was really, Dog Developer turned me on to actually trying out Unreal. I would have never, it seems so intimidating to me, some of the things you're capable of doing in Unreal. But if you just want to start playing with things, you can literally, anybody can load up Unreal on their computer and start manipulating objects and putting in I mean, there's a ton you can do with I have no coding experience whatsoever. And I thought that was just really fascinating how easy it is to get into an engine nowadays. And Harlock,
for sure.
Was it like that when you started, or is that something you've seen as the industry has changed? Or can you talk a little bit about that, like some of the your history with that?
Oh man, it definitely changed when I came into the industry at the point where everybody was switching over to a middleware engine. So, like throughout my entire time, from middle school to the end of Full Sail, I was always just, okay, got to make my own engine. And then as soon as I come out, it's like, okay, everybody, we're switching to Unity. It's like, okay, then.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, speaking of great entry levels, I forgot to mention this one. Core and is another like super entry level engine that came out right now. It's a lot of user generated assets.
Ooh.
So it's a lot of plug and play kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'm currently looking into Godot as well. Oof, ouch. So, but that one's not so much entry level. It's just a lot of fun to work with something so minimal, I guess.
I'm chuckling as well because Emily, hey, custom engine is still fun because Emily has, at this point, Emily, haven't you made a couple of different custom engines for your games? So,
Oh no, I don't disagree with that fact. Like I'm trying to work with Vulkan right now to see if I can get a rendering engine going. It's just there's not too big of a calling for it,
right.
you know. So, but I don't disagree with that. Making your own is very satisfying.
So at this point, you mentioned that you've been working on a game jam, and when you're working on something for yourself, this isn't a job that you're getting hired for or anything. What do you consider? I mean, do you have like an idea for a mechanic or for a story you want to tell? Like, how when you have an idea for something, where does it start? Is it tell us a little bit about like the process of something that you just you want to get out there during a jam or whatever?
Okay. When it comes to game jam, what I do is. First, you get the theme, and then there's actually a website that a friend of mine uses. It gives you suggestions for games. Like the jam before this one, when I used it, it was like a town being invaded by werewolves. That's only like 1 bit, and so I was like, that's a really cool idea. I took out like the werewolves part and I made it a platformer, and so that was a lot of fun. But yeah, most of the time my ideas are just come like to me randomly. I guess it's if it's a personal project that's not for a game jam, what I like to do is I like to go, okay, what would I really like to make, and then I would make the mechanics first. And then I'll be like, okay, now what kind of theme can I put on this, and like wrap it up. Like after this game jam, I'm working on my personal project, which is an action RPG, and I've written the game doc for it like back during Full Sail. So I've been wanting to make this game for a long time, and I never felt ready for it until now. So right now I'm pretty much breaking it down to, okay, what's the minimalistic that I need to do before I can make this game. And so that's why I have currently right now I have a player movement, I have a battle system, and I'm trying to see what can I do to make a small little demo for it, because I kind of want to the project I'm working on right now, I kind of want to make a demo for it and then make a Kickstarter for it, see how far that goes.
So you've mentioned that a couple times now, and I think that's something really interesting and important to explore, the minimal viable product. What exactly is that, and why is that so important to the process?
Let me see. I'm actually making a video about this for my series.
I'm glad to see that you've done it for your own personal project, as well as, huge companies will go through this process as well. So really, it applies to every different type of game development.
It applies to everything, yeah. Minimal viable product. You basically want to take the main focus of like your game, and break it down to its finest core. The biggest example that everybody uses that I've heard so far is Mario. Take Mario, you take away the enemies, you take away having to go to a goal. You have to like focus on what the first primary level is going to be. So you're basically having just a dude running and jumping on screen, trying to make that fun before you add in any additional mechanics to it. So kind of like just focusing down like maybe one or two mechanics, making that fun, and then adding on to that. And if you can make your core fun, then everything else will just add on top of that. So that's how I see MVP as.
I'm glad
what Chad thinks.
Yeah, if anybody has any other ideas, please share, because I think I really appreciate that, and I think that's such an important part, that making the game in its most simplest form fun, like making it enjoyable experience for yourself, obviously, but then whoever you're sharing that with to enjoy it. And that's the way I've always seen it as well. And I think that's such an important part of the process, because I've watched now a bunch of GDC talks, and they talk about how at some the game's going to change from what your original idea was, but if that core experience, that should be what leads you from one thing to the other.
Mm-hmm.
MVP is the does this work starting point. Yeah, good point, Doug Developer. You mentioned this too, and I think this is actually important. Doug's bringing it up, but the game idea generators. And so for some people, they are blessed with ideas, being creative. They'll have a million ideas and just not enough time to execute them. Others, that can be like the toughest part. You have all these skills and everything that you know how to make a game, but what's the initial idea? So the fact that generators exist, I haven't pursued any myself. It sounds like that's actually a really cool place to start.
Oh yeah, they helped me out plenty of times, because sometimes I just go, I blank on some ideas. I'm like, okay, I want to make this type of game, but I don't know what to apply to it to make it interesting. So
right, totally. And I think it's also interesting, you're trying to balance. We live in the States where it's like you got to eat, so you got to take, you got to work and you got to do your jobs. So finding time for your own creative projects, I know, can be important, but also finding that time can be a real challenge, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, you tell me about it, especially with how sporadic my current job is right now.
It's
it's wild.
I was a freelancer for 2 years. I literally just started a full-time job just about a month or two ago. And while it's great because you get to work, in my opinion, you get to work on a diverse group of projects, which is the biggest thing that I love about freelancing, is like you're always working on something different, which is awesome for your skills and just frame of mind, all that stuff. But wondering where your next paycheck for me has been a real challenge. Like that's, that for other people, that's totally fine for them. But for me, it's been a challenge. And so,
that's the scary part of it.
Right. Exactly. You got to eat. So it's But I know that there's, I've met people who have had a career for 30 years who have freelanced for 30 years. Like that is a way that you can pursue, especially keeping yourself afloat and things like that. So working on contract, things like that.
Just sometimes it's just competitive and pretty scary to like jump into that sometimes. So I can understand why people don't do that.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really interesting developing for indie games. What are some of the challenges that face an indie developer as compared to like, EA or somebody who's, billions of dollar company?
I think the biggest thing for most, especially startups, is scope. Trying to find the right size for a project and knowing when to stop, like making that idea grow. That's been one of my most difficult things as a developer when I first started out. I always had bloated up ideas that I wouldn't see any progress on it, so I would get bored and start something new. And so that's one of the main, I guess, evils of a starting indie. Just scope.
Right.
And I think another thing it would probably be like most indies don't want to get out of their comfort zone. Like as a programmer, I first didn't want to touch anything as far as art goes, because I was like, I don't want to do that. It's not my thing. I don't want to mess up.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's one of the biggest things. I mean, yeah, sure. If you don't know how to code, there's plenty of ways to get around that nowadays. Like there's visual scripting, plenty of amazing tutorials just for getting started, and vice versa. Like I didn't know how to art, and now I'm doing tutorials and stuff, and now I'm getting really into it. So I think just scope, and then breaking out of your comfort zone and thinking that you only have to wear one hat. Because as an indie developer, especially if you're solo, you have to wear multiple hats. Like right now, with my current situation, I am taking in a lot of PR and marketing talks from GDC, because I know that's the next step I'm going to have to take pretty soon. And I know nothing about that, so I'm going to be reading up on that and asking for help everywhere for it. So
It is, so I don't know, I wouldn't say unfortunate, but it is part of getting a game into people's hands is learning how to market it and learning how to publish, how can you get this game? How can people see your game? Because at some point you're going to want to sell this stuff. And, there's sometimes there are, intangibles, and a good game is still a good game, but there are always other aspects that are not necessarily, like you said, just coding. And those are career paths as well, especially for young people who are perhaps just coming out of school or are looking to pursue a career in the games industry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you have, nowadays, is there something that appeals? Is there a job that appeals to you more than others in game development? Is there something or do you still just like messing around, learning all these other, doing all these other things?
I mean, you could say learning. I mean, as a skill, we're continuing developing it. So, I mean, we're never not learning. But to not going off on that tangent, I still love programming. I'll probably always love to program. But I've been getting into like the 3D animation and modeling aspect of it now.
Cool.
And I'm having a lot of fun with that. I'm getting better with 3D modeling and rigging, but it's a chore, but it's a fun chore, if that makes sense.
All of it's time consuming. That's the thing. All of it's going to take your time. And to your point, I'm glad you mentioned that, and perhaps I misspoke, because it's like, I always feel, even, in content creation, I feel very comfortable in that environment. I still love learning new things and exploring, like you said, exploring things you haven't done before. It's because you realize when you start analyzing your own skills, it really does seem to make you better at whatever job you're doing. I think that's an important part of the aspect to working in development or working in all this kind of stuff that you're mentioning. It sounds like it's the same for you as well.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of fun. I always enjoy learning new things or keeping up with stuff. I take a lot of courses on like Udemy and Zenva Academy, so that's how I keep up to date sometimes. Zenva Academy, not so much anymore, because like I've pretty much taken all their courses
at this point. Well, that was going to be my next question. If somebody if a young person is coming out of high school or is somewhere around that age, if they wanted to pursue this career, there seems like there's multiple ways. You can go to college, you can do that, or you can go to school. You can also train yourself. What do you think are some good, helpful tips to start pursuing, game development?
I think it's dependent on which part of game development that you want to take a part in. Like if it's like for example, if it's going to be programming aspect, you can go to college for software engineering programming to get that out of the way. It's always good to have a backup, is what they told me. But I just dove in and went to like a game development school. But if that's not viable for someone,
sure.
What you can do is, as you're going to school, you can also take like game dev courses online nowadays. It's so easy with like Udemy. There's a specific teacher, GameDev.tv. They're pretty good for beginners. Not quite the best, but they're always throwing their courses around for about $9-10. And they'll teach you the ins and outs of whatever you want to learn. Like they have a complete course on Unreal, Unity, Blender. It's pretty good. So right now, if you want to learn, that's a good way to start. Like just going on the internet, finding out what you want to do, and seeing what's available. Like there's so many doors open right now that I didn't have like back then that I wish I did.
I'm glad you. No, for real. Like, so it's interesting on the podcast. There have been a fair amount of software developers on the podcast who are speedrunners, but who don't work in the games industry specifically. But they pursued a career in software development, and perhaps they do level creation for fun on the side. I know Eon is working on her ROM hack for Zelda 2. It's like there's all these different things you can do. Ancillary or adjacent as well, if you wanted to pursue a career in just traditional software development, working for a company or something like that as well.
Yeah, I say basic like software development you can take that anywhere.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. So have you played anything in the last like 5 to 10 years or more recently that you've found inspiration in as far as a creator and as a as a game dev?
I mean, you saw my Undertale collection. So,
Heck yeah.
I guess you could say that. Oh man, when that came out, I was just like, and learning who it was kind of funny. I can't say like, I can only say acquaintance because I only knew of Toby from the Starman.net forum days, because I was frequently on there because Earthbound. That's another super like heavy series.
Absolutely.
I'm into. So, let me see. There's a lot of. I can say that most of the indie games kind of inspire me in some way that I play. Like whether it's the message that they try to bring, or like if they bring something new to the table and I go like, oh man, I didn't think about doing that. That's pretty cool. One of the biggest indie games that did that for me, I don't know how long ago it's been since it came out, but Super Hot, when that came out, I was mad because like I was like, this is a first-person shooter, and all they're doing is telling the game to update as the player moves, and I was like, that's such a brilliant idea. That sounds like a game-breaking bug that became a really fun game.
Absolutely. Oh, so true. Yeah, I haven't played the game, but yeah, something so simple, right? But to your point, breaking it down to its simplest form.
Yeah, but let me see, because
well.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the one thing I was going to say is, I think it's fair to be critical of Steam and Nintendo and some of the other companies, but like Switch has been just a great place for indie games to actually find an audience. Obviously, Steam now for over 10 or 15, whatever long Steam's been around now, has been a great place to see. Like, I think indie games really have had a renaissance in the last 10, 15, 20 years because of some of these platforms that were enabled these games to get into the hands of people,
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, I think now is the best time for like indie devs to publish to different platforms to get seen. There's just so many opportunities. Like, I'm still fighting to get myself a Switch dev console, but they want me to actually make something first.
There's always got to be a barrier, but you can see, like, I mean, you just see how games find an audience there. Before then, Xbox was one of those places where, when digital distribution started happening, was that Xbox 360, whatever year, I can't remember which.
The 360 and the Xbox Arcade.
Right, Xbox Arcade. There we go. Yeah, thank you. That too. Where all of a sudden there were these platforms. Oh, really? What game?
Well, it was a Full Sail. It was just a top-down twin stick shooter that me and a couple of friends made. We had a club at school devoted to learning X and A for Xbox Live Arcade.
What's the process of getting your game on a platform like that?
At the time, it was find somebody that, like a correspondent, and filling out some forms, keeping them up to date. They would go like, okay, send me a build of your game every so often, and then as soon as your game hit 1.0, that's when they would go like, okay, your game's gonna hit the store at this time. It's gonna be on the front page for this amount of days, and that's it. So they really wouldn't help with PR because you were an indie,
right?
So. But it was a lot of fun.
What's it like? Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt.
I was gonna say it's kind of like the similar. They still have the similar process with Xbox ID. Xbox at ID, which is the indie unit of their stuff. Which actually the easiest console to get on right now is actually the Xbox One, because the Xbox One is a dev console. So
I've heard that so often, that the Microsoft platform, and now it's even easier, right? So you can actually multi-platform it now and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you develop for a console? I mean, do you have a dev console at home, like or in the office or whatever it is? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Working with a dev console, I've only published to Xbox Live Arcade, but I've developed a game for the PS Vita. Uh, what you most For the Vita, it was you didn't have to have any special hardware. You just connected it to a computer. But you had to have the software development kit as well as download this special app onto the console itself. The same with the Xbox. It's a separate mode, a development mode that you connect it to like a PC, and then you send your stuff to it. With the Xbox, you can either do like their own library, so you can kind of create your own engine for it, or there's a Unity aspect of it now, to where you connect it and then via Unity you can export it out. And you just got to make sure you don't have any like proprietary code. Like you can't have Windows code for an Xbox, which is kind of weird, but it happens.
That is kind of weird, but okay. So that's pretty cool. So when you're developing, you can you have instant access to try out whatever nightly build or whatever you're working on type of thing.
Yeah. The funniest one I've seen so far as exporters go is with the Nintendo Switch and Game Maker Studio. What they do is they just take the Windows executable and they just wrap it so where the Switch can play the executable. So what a friend of mine did, because he's making a game right now called Heartbound, and he wants to put it on the Switch. One of his fans actually helped him do this. Is they took Undertale and they swapped the executable for Undertale with his game, and it's playable on Switch.
What?
It's so wild. Yeah.
Wow.
With Game Maker, it's just a Switch with an executable. I think there's really no console exclusive code for Game Maker Studio, but don't quote me on that. Maybe he put some in advance. I don't know, but I did see his game working on the Switch, which was hilarious.
So Dog Developer mentions this in the chat, and I think it's a really important point. We've already talked about it a couple of different times, but the tools are so much more readily available for multi-platform releasing. Just the tools in general. There is this barrier to entry into developing a game just seems to get easier, and there is really nothing stopping anybody at this point. You need a computer, I guess. You do need a computer, but there's really, I mean, the barrier is almost non-existent to just start developing and go out there and start doing things. It really seems that way.
Yeah, and I'm actually pretty excited for that because, like, I think people are now seeing that indie games do like have a spotlight on themselves, and it's really good because there's a lot of great indie games coming out right now.
There really are, and not all of them are. Let me put it this way. It's really nice that like even something as simple as like Nintendo highlighting and spotlighting their indie developers, it's a step. It's a step in the direction, because as you mentioned, Harlock, like especially when you're indie developing, you don't necessarily have money to spend on marketing and PR and things that get this into the hands of people. So the fact that we see that side, that indie gaming keeps getting bigger every year, I really do. Oh, it's so great. Maybe mobile has helped that out. I'm not 100% sure, but it's definitely nice to see that happening because there's so many great games being developed right now.
Mm-hmm. Mobile is a different like monster entirely.
Have you done any mobile development?
I've been meaning to, but not anything like hardcore. The Carnival Cruise games that I did.
Yeah.
There's a mobile port for them. The hospital game, that's strictly like mobile because it has to attach to the controller. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's that. But I haven't really done like a mobile game. I kind of want to make a city builder and put it on mobile and see how that works.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That'll be it for like another time.
Well,
but lately I've been like addicted to like random like game dev gadgets, like the one that I showed you earlier.
Yeah.
Find it. Ouch.
Well, that's a hot thing too. This new hardware coming out in the you might call mobile. Look at it. Tell us about that. What is that?
It's the Ardu Boy. It looks kind of like a Game Boy, but it's about as thin as a credit card. It uses an Arduino board. It connects to your PC, and you can actually make games for it. It has its own library and stuff. It's only a it's not quite. It's not an LED screen like the Tiger games. I wish you could see this, but like it's
Right.
kind of a 1-bit console, so only white and black, and it only bleeps and boops. It only has 2 sound like ports to it.
Emily's
So,
double checking.
it's a lot of
Arduino or Arduino?
Arduino,
Okay.
but the thing itself is called the Ardu Boy because there's a bunch of clones out there.
It's definitely.
But I've been like addicted to stuff like that right now, so
It's super fun to have something like that. Throw it in the pocket, and you could get you get a gaming experience. It's something the size of a credit card.
yeah. I'm trying to make like a small little game for it, so like whenever I'm at like a convention and passing out like my my business cards or whatever, if they want to see something quick that I made, I can pull it out, show it off.
So it's obvious you have this love for video games that I think all of us who are in this community who speedrun and all that kind of stuff share. Tell me a little bit about GameSpace and kind of your ideas for doing some video essays on video games.
So with GameSpace, it initially started out as like, okay, me and a friend want to do a podcast, and then it was just like, hey, you know what? I'm bored. I want to work on like some new skills. So he was like, well, you used to be big on YouTube. Why not give that a try again? And so I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So we moved it from an audio podcast to like a video podcast. And then from that point, we're like, okay, we have different ideas. So I'm posting like the video essays. My goal for the video essays, and I'm still trying to fine tune it, is I want to talk about games from both a player like point of view and a developer point of view. So I kind of want to go into like a bit of the mechanic, but it's still staying relative to the game itself. Kind of like what I did for, I don't know if you saw the Breath of the Wild one, because I do have that one unlisted, but I did it for Final Fantasy as well.
Right.
And the Undertale one, I think that's my best video so far, even though it's my latest video. I feel like I really went out with that one because I talk in that one about the morality in the game of how it's affected by your choice. I'm not going to go into spoilers because I know you want to play the game yourself.
I appreciate that. Well,
it has some great stuff though. Whenever you finish it completely, give my video a try.
So just from our conversations and the video, I watched your Dark Souls and the Final Fantasy video. Storytelling is obviously really important to you, and you are obviously impacted and inspired by some of the storytelling that's happened in games now for decades. And I am right there with you. And even in its simplest form, storytelling can be super simple, but it's one of the things that I really appreciate and respect so much out of video games. What about, those games, and also just in general, why you react quite a bit to storytelling? It seems like that's something you're really into.
I guess, excuse me. I guess it's just because, I don't know, I'm growing up with a lot of RPGs and like fantasy-based like novels and other games. I'm just big on kind of like the escapism of games.
Yeah.
Like I figure, like, you play a game to kind of like wind down, cool off a bit, kind of like escape and enjoy something.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And even developer, heck, Space Invader has storytelling. I totally agree. And at the time when Space Invaders came out, like that was an escapism. I'm right there with you, Captain Harlock. I enjoy fantasy, sci-fi, all that kind of stuff, and it's great visiting or spending time in a place that isn't of where we are at this current moment. And so it's that's the thing I've really reacted to great storytelling, and it exists in so many different forms in games nowadays. We've really seen some really interesting experimentation with storytelling nowadays, and even back then, even 30 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. There's a game I do want to make a video on that I want to talk about. That
please.
Don't know if you've heard of White Knight Chronicles.
Heard of it, never played it. Yeah,
old PS3 game.
Mm-hmm.
What I fully enjoyed about it was the fact that it had a creative character but you weren't creating the main character. You were creating the secondary character to the main character. And I found that really interesting and very, very fun.
I don't know if you've played, and I will try my best here not to spoil it, but I think Braid is an example of experimenting with storytelling from a character standpoint, and where that character's journey goes. It ends in an unexpected way that you might not think. It's got a great game mechanic too, where you can just rewind,
for sure.
But
rewind, and there's that one instance with the cloud where you have to wait in the game for what is it, like 4 or 8 hours?
Yeah, yes, which is super interesting and super cool. But one thing that I think Braid does so well is that the story is interesting, the character development is super fascinating, especially as you get later on into the game. But then it has this really cool mechanic in it as well, and it's like, once again, indie game, but putting all those elements together. Like indie games in general don't have to follow any one mold. They can have all of these different aspects to it and still be really great.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of Braid, I think he's it's either coming out again as a remaster or he's making a sequel. I remember something being announced about Braid earlier this year.
I thought it might have been a remaster. I think I saw something about it for remaster.
Yeah, I think I'm putting my money on remaster, but I don't fully remember it.
Which it does sometimes suck having to buy games over and again, but I really enjoy the remasters. I think they're giving new people to experience the game. That's just my opinion. It seems like new people are coming in to some of these remasters and things like that, and I'm glad some companies are putting some money behind it because I'm enjoying so far the remasters I've played. So
yeah, the remasters of old games are getting to be very welcoming. Like some of my favorite games have gotten a remaster recently, so.
I am right there with you, and it sucks having, like I said, paying for it again. But hey, if they're gonna put the time into it, I'm totally down. So, what other, if you don't mind sharing, what are some of the other videos you'd like to work on and start to continue to create some content around?
Ooh, I have I'm a bit behind on publishing my videos, but I'm finishing up one on. Battle Royales and Fall Guys.
Yeah.
That I did a bit of research in. Particularly, I'm not a fan of Battle Royales, but seeing what Fall Guys recently has done, it's gotten me thinking about different things. Like, it's definitely shown that Battle Royales don't always have to be like shooters or like King of the Hill games.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're also seeing that, I don't know, who knows how long it's going to be out for, but the Super Mario game, they just announced with Battle Royale type of thing. And I agree, Dog. Fall Guys is such a simple concept, but to Harlock's point, it doesn't have to just be a first person shooter, just go around shooting everyone to get there. There are some really interesting ideas out there for Battle Royale that is still the format's basically still the same. One person wins, but there are so many interesting things you can do within that. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I have an idea for a Battle Royale, but I'll have to play around with it. For sure.
What are you playing right now? What's what's next? Are there some games you want to play? Things like that? What's next for you?
Let me see. I'm gonna open up my Steam library.
Load up the 500 games. Yeah, I totally agree, Dog. It's executed amazingly through visuals. I couldn't agree with you more, and I haven't even played Fall Guys yet. I really need to.
More like 1,000 games, but recently I've gotten back into Final Fantasy 14 because I'm an MMO person.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Recent games, not really. Playing a lot of Fall Guys and Among Us right now with friends.
There you go.
Finishing up Dragon Quest 11. Still learning the route for that. Believe it or not, it's just long because it's an RPG. Games I'm looking forward to, not really. I did get the Mario collection though on my Switch.
Nice.
So I've been playing that because I never owned Mario 64. So.
Oh. It's a classic. It's a good platformer. You mentioned, why don't we touch it just for a second? Final Fantasy 14. I haven't had a chance to play, but I've watched some people stream it, and quite often I hear how good the storytelling is in something like that. And I've always wondered, that seems like it's got to be a challenge to work on all these different storytelling elements through this massively multiplayer online environment.
Yeah, I've got to say that that's what captivated me for 14 because I did try a while. The story didn't quite grasp me as much as it did with 14. It's it's definitely really they focused more on the story when the first expansion came out, Heaven's Ward.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they started focusing down on story, and that so far has been the best story that they've told. But it's been keeping me posted because that's one of the things I play for. Just the story. It's a lot of fun. It's like your traditional classical Final Fantasy, but with different. You change jobs,
Right.
and the story is pretty long and engaging. So.
Well, I mean, they must be doing something right because I see people still. There's still a lot of people still playing FF14 and even some playing Final Fantasy 11, which still kind of blows my mind. But you could still subscribe and everything and be there in the FF11 environment.
What's weird is that the story, like they wrapped up 11. I don't mean to get to become the Final Fantasy nerd right now, but they wrapped up the story for 11, and now they recently announced that they're adding another expansion. It's like, but everything's already concluded. Like everything was wrapped up. So I'm curious where they're going with that. And then as far as 14 goes, right now we're in 5.0 territory, and they have plans for up to 7.0. So we still have 2 more expansions to go after this.
I don't mind.
What really got me interested, though, is the recent Final Fantasy 16. It's being done by the MMO people.
Yes. Okay. So I don't mind geeking out on Final Fantasy at all. I'm right there with you because I saw the trailer, and the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, this looks whatever. But then as I started watching it again, and then I hear that the team behind FF14 is behind it, this sounds like it could be really interesting.
Yeah, I'm very. I was very excited to see it. If you haven't seen the Japanese version of the trailer, go ahead and do that because it shows a bit more of the game.
Oh, cool. I will definitely check it out. I'm also, I got to be honest, Square doesn't seem to ever rush anything. And so the fact that we got an announcement of this game so soon after Final Fantasy VII Remake just released, that was even more surprising that something came out so soon. So.
Oh man, 7 Remake. That was a fun time.
I agree. I really enjoyed my playthrough of that. Did you as well?
Yeah. And then I played through it again in hard mode. So.
Were you able to beat in hard mode?
Not yet.
Okay.
But there's a piece of equipment that really helps out.
That's the one thing I want to go explore because I didn't do a lot of side questing in my first playthrough. I wanted to move through the story, and I know there is definitely a lot of weapons and things I did not get that not even close to getting. Yeah. So
there's a hard mode piece of armor that it feels like it would break hard mode, but it doesn't. What it does is after you use your limit break, it slowly refills it again.
Oh my gosh, that's nice.
So it's helpful in hard mode, but it doesn't break it. So I've been playing that a lot.
Well, I got to tell you, I really do appreciate you talking about your experience and kind of your journey through game development, especially in the indie scene, and then as working on your own personal projects. I know it's not always easy pursuing this career, especially if you're working on contracts or something like that. But even if you're working for a company, it's never easy bringing a game to the market and bringing it to put it in people's hands, whether you're doing it by yourself or with a team or anything like that. I really do appreciate you taking the time. Tell us about your place on the internet. If people want to follow you or see some of the things you do, where can we follow you?
Oof. The biggest way to follow me, I guess, right now would probably be my Twitch because I just finished getting sort of rebranding it. So I'm gonna start streaming again pretty soon. My game dev stuff.
Good.
So that's twitch.tv/captain_Harlock_. And then there's also my Twitter, which is jadam009. Those are the 2 big places you can catch me. And the game space. I forgot about that, but that doesn't have a URL attached to it. So if you want to link that for me, I'll send you the channel URL. But you could also find it on my Twitch page now. So
And there's this great article that a little interview with Harlock that I'm going to link to as well in the show notes, because it talks a little bit about your approach to gaming and the gamification of things. And I think it's really kind of interesting stuff that you explore and that you're into. And I know implementing that when it comes to real life stuff has to be time consuming and a challenge and everything like that.
Oh man, I love gamification though, especially when it comes to like trying to figure out with learning. That was the main goal with continuing to diffuse fun and learning. So that's why we did the hospital game, and I forgot to mention it, but I'll mention it now.
Please.
We're developing a puzzle platformer that teaches color theory, and we have colorblind, multiple colorblind modes to show people what the different levels of colorblindness are, and to help them, I guess, sort of relate to that, so they can understand. Because being colorblind isn't just black and white. It's a varying degree of things.
I was looking at our chat history, and we'd messaged about this a little bit back when that interview came out, because I really appreciate your passion for the learning space as far as gaming goes and gamification, as you mentioned, because there really is. It can be really impactful to learn things through gaming, and as you mentioned, gamification. And I think that's such an interesting space to be in, and it shows you some of the possibilities that you can do. Like you're people in the hospital, people with some of the. It sounds like, and you mentioned at the beginning of this whole thing, you had an experience like this. This is one of the ways you learn to read, and it sounds like that's kind of stuck with you your whole life.
Yeah, that I felt like I owed it, to give back to the community that gave me something to strive for.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I teach, and then I tried to incorporate better ways of implementing game design into stuff.
Well, it's super cool, and I'm glad you're doing it. And I appreciate so much the time that you've spent talking about all this stuff. I know it's really interesting, and I think there's a lot of, all the time I hear people asking and wondering, hey, how do I get into the games industry? What do you do? And it sounds like from your point, get out there, start creating, start doing stuff, start breaking things.
The advice I would have to give, if you want to make a game, whether you're a solo or you're a small team, and everybody says this, is to make a game, but make it small. But the thing people don't tell you is also put yourself on a deadline. Because with that, you can actually see yourself completing something and pushing it out. So I would say make something small and then give yourself 2 months to work on it, polish it, and then release it out to the people. I feel like that opens up the floodgates for a lot of people who struggle with the game design. They try to make something small, but they don't have that deadline aspect to it. So that's my 2 cents.
No, I think that's so great. Dog Developer says jams help a lot with small and deadline stuff. It's amazing what kind of creativity can happen from constraints, and I think that's one of the things you're talking about. Set a date, give yourself a deadline to get to actually say, hey, this game is coming out regardless. It can make you do some amazing things. That's for sure. I agree. So with all that being said, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And thanks for spending some time with us and talking games. I appreciate it.
No, man, thank you. I like I always say, I enjoy whenever we chit-chat. So I just miss hanging out. Hopefully the world stops being on fire and we can do that again.
Totally agree. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. If you're enjoying the podcast, subscribe, leave a review. All those things go a long way to helping out the podcast. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm on Twitter @LatMackey, or you can also join the LatMackey Discord, where we have a sequence break channel. We talk about guests, we have questions. It's really interactive, really fun. Please feel free to stop on by. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.